So a couple nonfiction books I have. First one is Soft, but I also can't just sit and read all the time. Wouldn't life be beautiful if we could? So Alex winds up getting involved in the case, and hi everybody, it's Audrey and welcome back to Chapter and Converse. And welcome to a little bit of a library book haul that I've got going on today. So my library Hoopla app allows me to borrow 10 books a month, and you bet I take full advantage of that opportunity. So I don't always read all of them, obviously, and sometimes I have to do some renewals and they overlap into other months, and sometimes they don't always work for me, but I definitely like to maximize the borrows, and it's a great way to get audiobooks. It's definitely my go-to for audiobooks. A great way to discover some new writers or like sample out some stuff and see if it's something I want to read or purchase, which I've definitely done in the past. So I just finished fulfilling my list for the month of January, and I thought I would share with you guys what I have currently on my library TBR borrow list haul. So the first book I have is Death in the Family by Tessa Wiegert, and I actually have already read this book, and I have it. So this is the first in a series. This is the Shana Merchant series, and I have book number 2, and book number 3 is coming out in, I will correct myself if I'm wrong, in April, I want to say, and I have the arc of it from NetGalley. So I read Death in the Family when it came out in 2019. Very much enjoyed it, but before I dive into book number 2, I wanted to refresh myself, so this is like an audiobook reread for me. So this is an isolated mystery. It is about a woman named Shana Merchant. She was a detective in the NYPD. She wound up leaving her job there and moving to upstate New York with her fiance for a more quiet police life, where sort of the worst thing in town would be maybe like a bar fight or something like that. But her and her partner wind up getting called out to this island where it's this very rich family from New York City who own the island, just to give you some perspective. And one of the sons is missing, and there is blood in his bed, and nobody knows what happened. And then of course the nor'easter comes in, so they are trapped on the island, and it's really, really good. So I am probably 85% into my reread right now. It's a great refresher. I remembered the core of the story, but I love being back in it. I will say, as a cautionary tale though, the audiobook itself is not great. And when I first listened to this book, because I actually listened to it originally in 2019 to see if it was something I was interested in. 2020. It was 2020. Did I say 2019? It's 2020. It's 2019. I was right the first time. Trust your instincts. I will say my advice is to not listen to the audiobook if it's your first time out, which I know sounds weird because I'm listening to the audiobook, but I remember this from the first time I listened to it because I listened to it a bit, was enjoying the story, wound up buying it after the fact. But my audiobook is messed up, and I assume they all are. I don't know. And it was messed up the first time out. So it goes from prologue to chapter 2 to chapter 1, which is psychotically confusing, obviously. After that, it follows the chapters as it should, but I don't love the narration on this one. So it's a single narrator, and it is a single POV book, but I don't like the accents and the inflections in the voice. So they're like, the matriarch of the family is the grandmother, and she just does her voice as like this very like old lady, which I find annoying. And there is a character who has an accent. There's actually 2 characters who have accents. I find it very much that it takes me out of the story. And I also feel like my enjoyment of the book was my putting my own spin on the characters and having my own vision of how they talk and how they move and all of that. And I felt like the audio isn't the best. So it's great for a reread. I realize I'm like probably turning you off from it, and I probably just talked about this book for entirely too long, but that's Death in the Family. The book itself is great. The book itself is absolutely great. The second book is 5 Total Strangers by Natalie D. Richards. So this is a YA thriller, isolated, snowy vibe mystery. I talked about this in my first wrap-up of January, which may or may not have come out yet. You guys know how that always works out. So this is 5 strangers, hence the name of the book, who are trying to get home for Christmas. So our main character, Mira, she is on a plane from California to Pennsylvania, lands in Pennsylvania. It's a massive blizzard and snowstorm, but she is desperate to get home, but there is no flight to connect to for her to get home. So she had met this one girl on the plane who then recruits 3 other people, They are college-age students. They wind up renting a car and driving, and it is all things that can possibly go wrong. And there is like thrillers and twists and red herrings. I did not really enjoy this book. This video is not starting out with a lot of positive vibes, is it? This felt very young YA to me. It felt very familiar, tropey to me, like I figured out the book, which is not something I typically do as much as I would like to say or think that I would be able to figure out books. And the characters kind of felt very one-dimensional to me, and it just felt very like cookie cutter in a lot of different ways. So I struggle with the fact that this is a YA book and I am not YA. I think to a younger audience, to someone who doesn't read thrillers a lot, I think there could be some twist and entertainment value to this. But as someone who, dare I say, is like a seasoned thriller reader and has super high expectations for a lot of books, this just felt really, just wasn't like an overly complex mystery for me. So I finished it because I wanted to know what was going to happen. So I didn't hate it when I was reading it. Like if I hated it that much, I would have stopped. But I wanted to know what the reveal was going to be, partially because I wanted to know if I was going to be right, I'll be honest. And it was just fine. It was just fine. I just don't think it was for me. I don't think it was for me as an adult. So I have a couple nonfiction books, and the first one is Stop Self-Sabotage by Judy Ho. I actually have the physical book of this as well, but a lot of times with nonfiction books, I like to do the audio and the read at the same time. So I did this with Atomic Habits. I did it with all the Gary John Bishop books. I just like to consume self-help nonfiction books a lot of the time in audio and then mark up my book as I go along. So this is exactly what you think it is. How to like help you to stop sabotaging yourself. So I'm only, I want to say maybe like 20% into this book, so can't give you guys a full review, but so far it's interesting. I'm enjoying it so far. It's easily consumable. It's easily digestible. This is a doctor who is writing the book, and it says it combines therapeutically proven strategies with practical tools and self-assessments. And there are exercises and practices in the book and like to-dos. So I'm enjoying it. I am definitely someone who self-sabotages, not on purpose. Or who knows, maybe I will find that the underlying thing is that I am intentionally sabotaging myself. So it says it's 6 steps to unlock your true motivation, harness your willpower, and get out of your own way. I need this desperately. The next book I have is It's Never Too Late to Begin Again by Julia Cameron. So in all fairness, this is targeted towards people who are at the second chapter of their life post-retirement, and it's how to get back into the creative life when you think it's too late. So I'm not there yet, but it's discovering creativity and meaning at midlife and beyond. So I haven't started this book yet, but I love Julia Cameron. I love The Artist's Way. I have talked about her on here before, and then I want to say it was December I listened to her and Natalie Goldberg, or it was earlier this month. I listened to her and Natalie Goldberg do a conversation about creativity and The Artist's Way. So I just enjoy consuming these books about creativity to fuel myself, to get me excited to write again, to sort of keep the juices flowing. And I always have great takeaways from these. So I thought, even though this is not directly targeted towards me, I still think there's probably good things that I can get out of this book. And again, she always talks about morning pages and artist dates and walks and how you can fuel yourself. So I'm intrigued to see it, read it, listen to it. You know what I mean? So that's why I picked it up. The next book I have is Rachel's Holiday by Marian Keyes. And this is another book that I've read before and I own. It's up really high, so I'm not gonna go get it. And I want to reread this because the sequel to this book, again, Rachel, is coming out in February in the UK, and I wanna say April in the US. So I read this book when it first came out a really, really long time ago, and I loved it so much. So this is part of her Walsh Sister series, which is a 5-book series. But then specifically, again, Rachel is gonna reflect back on Rachel, maybe it's like 20 years later. So Rachel's Holiday is about Rachel, and she was living in New York City and like living this very fast life and partying, and she winds up going back to Ireland, where she's from, and having to go into rehab because she basically has just partied, drank, done too much. And Rachel thinks that she's going to sort of like this Betty Ford clinic with a whole bunch of famous people, and it's going to be like a holiday. And it's going to be her and the rich and famous, and that she's basically going on like a spa break and is not really confronting her addiction. So Marian Keyes writes with such beauty and such grace, and she tackles complex issues with such beautiful humor and wit. And she herself is an alcoholic. She's talked very openly about it. There is some great conversation in this book. I loved it so much at the time. I haven't read it since, but it's one of those books that I still very vividly remember, and very vividly remember my reaction to it and my love of it. I love her characters. I love how she weaves her stories together, and her characters are just, they're messy and they're human and they are relatable. And I'm so excited to see what's going to happen next with Rachel. So I'm 1000% going to do sort of a combo listen read of this book. It's not a small book. The audiobook is 17 hours. I think the physical book is like 450 pages or something, but it doesn't ever feel huge. So I'm excited to get back into it, and I will keep you guys posted because I will 1000% be buying again Rachel. I haven't decided if I'm going to get the UK one so I can have it sooner, or if I'm just going to wait till it comes out in the US, but one way or another, this book will be in my hands within the next couple months. Another writing book that I picked up here is Writing Down the Bones by Natalie Goldberg. So I have read the physical book of this. I have it. I just wanted to reread it again, and I wanted to do it with Natalie Goldberg reading it to me and going through it. So I did this last year with Annie Lamont's Bird by Bird. I just very much enjoy these writing books, are ones that I've referenced and read over and over again over the years. And I just snagged this one because, again, I am going to start on my second draft of my book in February. I have taken the month off on purpose to recharge and get some distance from it. So I'm trying to kind of like refill the creative well, and this is one of the ways I'm going to do it. The next book I have is The Ice Princess by Camilla Läckberg. So I'm actually currently reading this book right now. I think I'm only maybe like 50 or 60 pages into it. And I do go on these kicks where I'm so obsessed with the book that I'm reading that I will do a combination of reading and listening, because I don't want to be away from the book, but I also can't just sit and read all the time. Wouldn't life be beautiful if we could? So I just picked this one up, and so far, again, early days on the book, but we have a journalist named Erica. She has been brought back to her hometown because her parents have passed away. And it's about a month later, she's still living there. She's obviously really struggling with things. And she winds up finding the body of one of her close friends from childhood who she has been out of touch with for over 20 years. And she is found in the bathtub, reportedly having taken her own life. So Alex, who is a writer and has been struggling for a topic for her next book, has decided she is going to write a memoir about her friend Alex as a way of dealing with her grief, and it kind of turns into an obsession, I guess. And then she winds up partnering with local detective Patrick Hedstrom, who is following his own suspicions about this case. And it says, but it's only when they start working together that the truth begins to emerge about a small town with a deeply disturbing past. So I'm very excited about this. Like I said, I'm liking it so far. I have only just started it. This is my first Camilla Läckberg book. This is actually the first in a series, and I will let you guys know what I think because I'm reading it right now. The next nonfiction book I have is We're Going to Need More Wine by Gabrielle Union. So I had actually borrowed this book in December and didn't get to it, so I reborrowed it this month. And I love me some Gabrielle Union for sure. I have heard great things about this. I've also heard great things about her newer book, but this is just a series of stories and vignettes and a memoir. And I've heard that it's very raw and it's very real, and there's comedic parts to it and there's very serious parts to it. And I just think it's going to be wonderful. I've heard just such beautiful things about it. So it says, Union bravely lays herself bare, uncovering a complex and courageous life of self-doubt and self-discovery with incredible poise and brutal honesty. So I'm really excited. She reads it herself, which always just ups the ante anytime someone reads their own biography. And I will let you guys know because I am not letting this one expire without reading it this time. The next book is another nonfiction, and this is Girl Walks Out of a Bar by Lisa F. Smith. And this is about Lisa. So it says she was a bright young lawyer at a prestigious law firm in New York City when alcoholism and drug addiction took over her life. What was once a way she escaped her insecurity and negativity as a teenager became a means of coping with the anxiety and stress of an impossible workload. So this explores her formative years, her decade of alcohol and drug abuse, divorce, and her road to recovery. Darkly comic, wrenchingly honest story. She describes how her circumstances conspired with her predisposition to depression and self-medication in an environment ripe for addiction to flourish. So I definitely think this is going to be a bit dark, probably a bit hard to read. In some ways, this was inspired by Rachel's Holiday for me to pick up, and I'm just very curious about it. I have had this kind of on and off of my list a couple of times, and I read, and I'm not gonna remember the name of it. I read Nothing Good Can Come From This last year or the year before, which was also a story about a woman who sort of, you know, grew up around alcohol as a teenager, and it went from socializing to sort of this everyday prevalence where, like, she talks about how it's everywhere, from like yoga and the book club and the bar, and like everywhere you go, every company retreat, every event you go to, alcohol is just prevalent everywhere. And she talked about how like her entire, you know, adult life and even part of her teenage life has just been like living with a low-grade hangover. So really interesting, I think. I will let you guys know I have not started this one yet either, but I'm curious about it, and it's gotten some really good reviews. So I wanted to see what it was all about. And then the last book I have is The Overnight Guest by Heather Gutenkopf. This just came out on Tuesday. I'm so excited that it's here. I got the audiobook of it. So this is isolated thriller in the woods, in the snow, and I'm so excited. So I talked about this in my January releases. So this is about a true crime writer, and she goes to this isolated farmhouse because she's trying to write her new book, and she's like totally fine being alone in this isolated place. So it says, a cozy fire, complete silence. It would be perfect if not for the fact that decades earlier at this very house, 2 people were murdered in cold blood and a girl disappeared without a trace. So the storm gets worse, she's trapped inside the house, and then she thought she was alone, but an unexpected guest shows up. It sounds so good. It sounds so good. So this is definitely like all the vibes right now. It is snowing outside today. This is definitely gonna be some nice dark and creepy vibes, I think. I've seen some great reviews of this one, and I'm super jazzed about it. That's gonna do it for me today, and that's gonna do it for books from the library. So let me know, do you guys leverage your library? How do you leverage your library? Do you use it as a way to sample some new books? It's a great way to satisfy my no spend January, but I can still pick up 10 books without spending a dime. But I'm excited for these, and I of course will let you guys know what I think after I've read them. But let me know what you're reading, what's going on with you. Thank you for hanging out today. I really appreciate it, and I will see you guys in another video really soon. Bye everybody.